Welcome to the Just Third Way podcast, where we ask the question, would you rather own or be owned? Brought to you by the Center for Economic and Social Justice at cesj.org.
Hello, thanks for tuning in again to the podcast. Today we have a very special guest, probably one of the original founders of the widespread ownership movement. His name is Gary Reber. Hello, Gary.
Hey, Dave.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing some time with us. I've always been impressed with your work, and I've recently read the material you put up about sort of your life story, and I was really amazed at all of your education in economics and experience in planning communities and things. You're really, really super qualified. So tell us just a few sentences about your background.
Well, I tell you, growing up, Dave, when I was 9 years old, I was really torn between, I always wanted to kind of be an architect. I was really fascinated with architecture at a very young age. And I was also very fascinated with jazz. And I got involved. My aunt and uncle took me to hear Stan Kenton when I was 9, and it blew me away, and I wanted to become a professional musician. So I took up saxophone early age and ended up becoming really close friends with Stan Kenton and eventually even producing him in the 70s. But anyway, I actually, my parents always said, you got to get a job, which, I'm sure most parents tell their children that every day.
Probably good
advice. For survival reasons, So anyway, I decided that I would pursue the path of architectural interests and city and urban planning interests. So I did my undergraduate and graduate studies in city and regional planning, economic development, with majors and sub-majors in economics and political science and sociology. And I was able to get full scholarships for my undergraduate and graduate work, and then I got a fellowship also for my doctorate work, which I did in Sweden. And actually, I had a choice between two fellowships, one to Germany, which was a Fulbright fellowship, and the other one was a Thord Gray fellowship to Sweden. And I really was fascinated with
grades.
Yeah, I was really fascinated with the Swedish approach to planning urban development and economic development, and so I took that fellowship. So I spent about 2 years in Sweden. And I also got to study with Gunnar Myrdal, who is the father of the Swedish social welfare state, and has written many, many books, and a major book on racism in the United States. So anyway, while I was in Sweden, I don't actually recall how it happened, but I came across this book called Two-Factor Theory, The Economics of Reality, by Louis Kelso and Patricia Heder. And, I read that book, and the light bulb just switched on in my head.
Wow.
I said, oh, my God, this is it. This is the solution. This is what we have to do. And, socialism doesn't really work. And we're beasts of private property. I mean, that's our nature. This is mine from the time you're a little kid. This is my bike. This is my toy. This is, you know what I mean? We have this identity with things, of control over things. So it switched on, and I read that, and then, of course, it referenced also the Capitalist Manifesto, and so that really just, literally blew my mind, my academic mind. And I always challenged Gunnar Myrdal. He always wanted to create jobs, and I kept saying, well, why don't we create ownership?
Right.
and let the non-human factor of production be prominent. but we own it. And we become productive through that, and then that enables us to derive earnings from not having to do any kind of make work or toil work that we really don't love to do.
But you presented these ideas to that fellow who was the founder of the Swedish social state.
Oh yeah. Well, he couldn't identify with it. They're so entrenched with this other stuff that it's really hard for them to break through. So anyway, I was there from 1966 to 68.
That's funny. You were there when I was born.
Okay, so I come back to the United States, and I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area.
I had got a job there, right?
Yeah, I had lived in San Francisco already before through my university education, which is University of Cincinnati, which is a co-op program. So we would go to school one quarter and work one quarter and do educational work, classwork, and then so we did that all for 5 years straight. So I lived in San Francisco. So anyway, I came back to the Bay Area, and I decided that I would look up Louis Kelso and introduce myself and see if we could somehow create some kind of working relationship to promote these ideas.
Right.
So I knocked on his law offices. He was a major corporate tax attorney in San Francisco, and he was based in the Transamerica building in San Francisco, which is a very famous building. So I knocked on his door and introduced myself, and we had a good chat, and I told him kind of the whole history of everything. And I said, I'd like to start an advocacy consulting firm. So I called it Agenda 2000 Incorporated because, this is like 68, 69 right in there. And he loved the idea, and so I suggested that he become chairman of the corporation, which he did. And then the other person I had as president was John Dykman. John Dykman was chairman of the City and Regional Planning Department at the University of California, Berkeley. Okay. And Dykman also became a strong supporter of Kelso's ideas. And I was able, under Dykman, to teach binary economics in the graduate program at Berkeley for a year.
See, that is the thing that's just amazing to me, because I never knew that binary economics was ever taught anywhere other than by Dr. Ashford at Syracuse. So you actually got to, I guess the powers that be decided not to keep it going, though, huh?
Yeah. Well, it was coming to Dykman's end of his term as chairman, so it was under his auspices that I was able to do that. I don't know if some other head professor would allow me to do something like that. So, but anyway, I had a whole program, and they had to read a bunch of different books I had. It was great. The students loved it. It was a great year that I had there. And of course, during this time, we had Agenda 2000, and we were working on various projects, and we advanced different financial mechanisms based on the idea of creating new capital owners without the requirement of past savings, basically.
Right.
And so we came up with vehicles for urban renewal projects and things like that. So in fact, the Citizens Land Bank that the Center for Social and Economic Justice, it really is founded on the work of Agenda 2000.
Oh yeah, right.
We originally developed that concept. Now let me tell you that. So John Dykman was president of Agenda 2000. I took a role of vice president and founder, but I wanted some heavy duty names in the front of. You understand?
Right, right.
So
you're not
for
the one
business
that wanted
purposes.
the credit. You just wanted to make things happen. So you put together something that you were doing all the work, and these other guys had their name on it. That's pretty slick. And
Yeah,
it's also
exactly.
unselfish of you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's kind of what was going on. So then through Kelso, because now Norman Curlin, who Norm,
Sure,
was working with Louis Kelso as his Washington D.C. Representative, and
right.
they did a lot of great work, including getting the tax laws revised to favor employee stock ownership plans, the ESOPs.
Right.
Which is really fantastic work. And so Norm, I invited Norm to come on board. So Norm came on board as the vice president of the company.
Okay.
So it's basically Kelso, Dykeman, Norm Curlin, and another really good friend of mine, Ken Friedman. That was the nucleus of the company.
Okay.
So we did a number of consulting projects and worked on developing different financial mechanisms. Now, so Agenda 2000, I had that company for, almost 10 years, maybe 8. I can't remember exactly. But anyway, in 1974, I decided to run for the United States Congress.
Wow.
Out of Contra Costa County. George Miller Sr. was not going to rerun, but what happened was his son was going to run, and the whole Democratic machine was backing his son. But I still put my name in the race and came in, I think, third in the primary. And my whole platform was based on Kelso's work and our work at Agenda 2000. So my whole platform was, workers owning the corporations that they're employed by, full dividend payouts, all this kind of stuff.
Right.
And during that time, also, I testified before the U.S. Congress on tax reform. Kelso did too, and so I did some of that. But anyway, after 74, I became so disillusioned with the state of affairs in the United States that I just
can't blame you for that.
I really just kind of dropped out. I mean, I always had the fires, kind of glowing in me, but it wasn't burning. So I was just so disappointed. And the biggest obstacle we have is education, let me tell you.
Right.
The problem that we have here is that you talk about these ideas, and I talk about them every day. I write about them every day. And people just don't have a vocabulary or an understanding of any of these terms.
Right. Well, also it's like a big cover-up is going on. I mean, the average person doesn't even understand how flawed a whole system of compounding interest is, and how there's got to be booms and busts.
Right. Yeah.
That's the thing.
So education is the number one challenge. Yeah. So anyway, I dropped out, and I told my wife I wanted to become a producer.
Heck yeah. I don't blame you.
A video concert producer, okay, and a jazz producer. So I told her I had to move to L.A., to Los Angeles, and we were based in the San Francisco Bay Area. Lived there for 18 years. So she didn't want to go there. So I said, well, let me go down there and sort things out and see if I can make this work. And if I can make it work, we'll find a good place that you'll love, So anyway, one of the first projects I was able to do was David Bowie's Serious Moonlight for HBO. And I also did. We also went to London and did Dolly Parton in London, and I did a number of jazz projects. And anyway, I finally brought my wife Marlene down to show her Manhattan Beach right on the coast, and she fell in love with it. and that's where we moved to.
Okay.
So I produced for a number of years, and then I mean I was really a big movie fan, and of course I was really into audio. Of course, being a producer and everything, a video concert festival, I was really into both of those aspects. So I eventually saw an opportunity in the early '90s to I was paying a lot of money for Laserdisc, for movies on Laserdisc,
right.
and I kept seeing these kind of little pamphlets or booklets on people writing about movies, right? And I said, well, hell, I can do that.
Yeah.
This is how I think. So what happened was I decided that let's start a little newsletter. A little home theater newsletter, and we'll review some Laserdiscs and things like that. And so I pitched the idea around, and I had already been a director of business development for, do you know Monster? Have you heard of Monster Cable?
Yeah, I saw that when you mentioned that, the Monster cables, that's some real high quality products. Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Right, yeah, well, Noel Lee, who owns Monster Cable, he's one of my closest friends. Anyway, I was director of business development for 8 years there, and we did a lot of work. We put Circuit City on the map, Best Buy, all kinds of big retailers. They become Monster dealers and things like that. And so while I was at Monster is when I developed this idea. So Marlene supported me on it. So I said, hey, guess what? We don't have to limit ourselves to a newsletter. We can do a magazine. I've got a bunch of advertisers.
Right.
From Dolby to JVC to Sony to all these different people, Universal Studios. So we actually launched the magazine in 1992.
That's Widescreen Review. It was called that back then?
Right, Widescreen Review, and we published that for 2 years while I was for the first 2 issues I published while I was still Director of Business Development at Monster. And then Noel wished me well, and he became an advertiser, and we went out on our own. And so we've been producing steadily for 27 years now.
That's
and
a
it's
real
now
success
called
story.
Widescreen Review and Custom Home Theater Design. So we have a global reach, and it's been great. But so recently, I saw that Norm, in the interim of my kind of absence, had created the Center for Social and Economic Justice.
Yeah.
CESJ.org, right?
Right.
And so I called up Norm, and he says, we were blown away to connect with each other. So I said,
After probably 30 years,
I'm
sure.
Right, I'm going to get back involved and and I did that. And but I at the same time, then the internet was coming really strong and all that stuff, and so I created www.foreconomicjustice.org, and that's where I do a lot of my writing, or directly on my Facebook page.
Right,
so
right.
Those 2 areas is where I write every day. So on foreconomicjustice.org, anyone listening can find over 3,000 articles or major commentary by me on other people's articles that have appeared in newspapers or major magazines or whatever.
Okay, yeah, let me reiterate that for everyone. It's FOR, economicjustice.org, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, and I would like to add, I want to just mention real quick, for everyone who is interested in appealing with liberals and progressives to get our message to people who think in a more like a Democrat, or, like I say, progressives. Gary's writings are, it's like we each play a sort of a role, in the movement, and I think Gary has sort of the language and the angle to reach the progressives. So if you have a friend who you kind of leans that way, then send them to Gary's work. Send them to that website, in fact, you kind of were a Bernie supporter, more or less. I mean, we all had to choose the least of the evils, right?
Yeah, well, they're all evil in the purest sense,
aren't they? Yes.
of the just third way.
Exactly.
Okay, but you kind of have to go with who you think you might be able to influence.
Right.
And that was my decision factor.
He would have been president if things were not corrupt.
Oh, exactly. I mean, it really exposed what what it's all about, you know.
Right.
So anyway, Bernie Sanders was a supporter of the Employee Stock Ownership Plan, ESOP. In fact, it was on his platform statements. He had a whole page on that. So
right.
That was one of my deciding factors, you know.
Right.
And plus, what he was talking about is, kind of a stopgap solutions, but not the long-term solution, but it's something to work from.
Right. And he's not really a purist on focusing on the actual pure credit aspect of it and things that are so important to making it work right. But at the same time, like you say, just anyone that's mentioning ESOP, I'm going to vote for him too, you know?
Right, exactly. But what I found was I tried to reach Bernie Sanders, and like all of these politicians, they have front men all around them that just block everything, and it was just so frustrating. So many times I tried to penetrate him and get messages to him and write to him and whatever. But
I'm sure that he's seen your work and seen your efforts to reach him. I mean, there's almost like no way that he could not have. I mean, you were very dominant on his Facebook page long before he ran for president. And I'm just convinced that these guys have such, I don't know, off the record incomes. I mean, I hate to accuse people of being criminals, but I mean, what is going on with these people? They go up there to Washington and they're flat broke. They're great people in the community that someone knew as a hard worker that was barely getting by. And a couple of years later, they've got these, private stock ownerships that are bringing them in, millions of dollars, and they're living in, multi-million-dollar houses and everything. It's like, so someone's paying them to not listen to what we're saying,
No, exactly. There's that going on, pay for play type stuff. And then there's insider information that's spread around for, the speculative stock market gains. So there's all that stuff going on.
The money creation thing is, how do we know? It means nothing is transparent. They might be creating money and just putting it in these politicians' accounts. I mean, we don't know.
No, you don't know. The other thing I wanted to say, not only for economicjustice.org, but the other place that listeners to this broadcast, please friend me. I have about 3,000 Facebook friends right now, all through the economic connection.
Right.
I only have a few
wanted
family
to mention
friends.
that too, Gary, because I really enjoyed reading your post on Facebook. And if anyone goes on your Facebook page, definitely add Gary as a friend or at least follow him. And look for his posting on May 11th at around 2 p.m. It's basically the story of Gary's life. And I didn't know, much about what you wrote, and I just find it interesting. And you're probably the most qualified expert in our movement in terms of education and job experience. And, it's just amazing. I know I was just blown away by that whole story. I thought it was really neat.
Thank you. Yeah, I've already forgot it. I can't. I'm an old guy now. I just turned 75, and I tell you, my memory. I just have already forgot it. I'm writing so much every day. I'm just right at the moment. Now.
Right. Well, it's good that
what
you
is
do.
Right now. But anyway, it is. What is it? It's Facebook.com and then /Editor Gary. So that Editor Gary came from the Widescreen Review thing. But it's really everything on that page is related to the just third way, broadening ownership, and critiques of all these different postings by other people and things like that. So it's a lot.
Right.
It's a lot.
Right.
And I have a lot of different published articles with the Huffington Post and Op-Ed News and things like that, that when you friend me, I'll send you links to all those. I'll send them links.
Right. And I've tried to comment on some of your articles on the Huffington Post. And, if you get some of these negative comments, I try to counter them. And it's funny, really, the only people that get very active are the Georgists for some reason.
Yeah. Jeez.
Funny. There's probably 5 or 6 of them in the whole country, but they seem to target us for some reason.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of hopeless with them. But anyway, so like I said, education is the biggest challenge. We don't teach economics in high school, really, or grade school. We don't teach any of this stuff. We don't teach about ownership, about capital asset ownership. None of this is really taught in our schools. Even in university level, if you look in an economic textbook, you won't even find in the index at the back a reference to ownership.
Right.
Very few even use the word ownership. I mean, it's like somehow taboo. They talk all around it, but they never narrow it down. They use wealthy. Wealth. Well, what is wealth? The wealth that comes from owning capital assets.
Exactly.
That are producing an income for you and building an asset base of value. As part of a big portfolio. That's why people are wealthy. They're wealthy because they own capital assets.
Right.
It's not because they're working in a job, except for very few people like athletes or big CEOs who are being totally overpaid and things like that. But most rich people are rich because they own.
Yep.
And that's not being taught. All that we're taught is that the way to earn money is to get a job. Exactly. And every piece of legislation that you read about, whether it's the tax cut that Trump did or whatever, it's all couched in the name of it will create jobs.
Right. And it's almost an insult to humanity to say that, that's as far as we have advanced is busy work and focusing on, sort of manual labor mentality. It's time for the masses to, go past that and into the realm of technology. We can do things. We can do art and music and all of these things that are the better side of life, and have the machines, the robots and the computer programs to do the menial stuff. What's wrong with thinking that way? No,
there's nothing wrong. That's really what we want to do. You want to get yourself into a position where you spend your days or nights or whatever doing the things you love.
Exactly.
That's what we want to be. That's what really makes us happy and stuff, is being able to do that. And to a large degree, you have to be financially independent to really pursue those dreams fully. And the only way you're going to become financially independent is to become a capital asset owner. And by what we mean by capital assets, or capital in the classical dictionary sense, is what Kelso framed as the non-human factor. And that's how he came up in his book, Two-Factor Theory. There's basically 2 factors of production, and one is the human factor, which includes all forms of any kind of human input, okay? And the other is the non-human input, which non-human factor, which includes all non-human aspects of production, both of which, both labor and capital, are owned by the laborer, the individual, or by individuals or associations of individuals who own the capital.
Right.
And that includes land, automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, computerized production systems, data systems, you name it, structures, buildings, hotels. Those are all capital assets.
Right, and they make
somebody,
money, and they're being concentrated.
Yeah, and somebody owns that stuff.
Yep.
Somebody owns that stuff. They're individuals. They're held as a legal entity, as a corporation, but a corporation is owned by all these individuals. So the thing is, we don't teach anything about this.
Right.
We don't teach how you become an owner. And of course, to become an owner in today's world, you either have to inherit it, from your parents or grandparents, or even beyond, or
you have to work very smart.
You have to work very smart and save, or have a high income from your job and be able to save substantially, and then to invest.
Right.
Okay. Now, when you invest today, we're talking about the stock exchanges, and of course, those are basically legalized gambling casinos, because what you're doing there, with the exception of an initial stock ownership, IPO, public offering, you're really just buying someone else's ownership who's selling it.
Right.
There's nothing new is being created.
Right.
And
that's
you're speculating that the value of what you bought is going to go up.
Right. I think
and then
Mike
you can sell it at some future time.
Yeah, he calls that the secondary market.
Yeah.
It's like the leftover stocks.
Yeah, it's the leftovers. But the real thing is getting in on the action when you're forming new capital assets.
Right.
Those are growth projects. Okay, and the whole logic of forming new capital assets or any business venture is that it will pay for itself. In other words, it will generate profits, enough profits to retire any debt required to finance the original formation of those capital assets. And once that debt is paid off, which typically takes anywhere from 3 to 5 to 7 years, that asset will continue to produce an income indefinitely with proper maintenance, right? And upgrading of facilities and things like that any hotel does, or any factory does, or anywhere. They're constantly doing maintenance and upgrading and, these things.
Right.
To keep their money machine going, right?
Yep, that's just good management. It really is. So I agree that one of the main things is education. People have to learn about these things. But it seems like there's also an element of apathy that, even when people get educated, it's like they still find a way to ignore how important, ownership and fixing the money system can be. And so I have been thinking, I wanted to ask your opinion about this. Instead of working as our one movement to try to enact laws for the whole country, to acknowledge that there's a lot of different proposals out there, but we're all united on the money system being broke, and say, maybe form a coalition and say, let's have a test of these different ideas by Federal Reserve District or something like. Do you think we might make more progress doing something like that?
Yeah, that's a good idea. In other words, each idea could possibly be
tested,
tried in each of the in one of each of the 12 regional Federal Reserve districts.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If people tried different theories, and it just seems to me like ours would prevail, and people would be like, "Hey, I want to move over there. That one's working." And
yeah, but Dave, the problem with that even is the challenge is that we don't have the resources to launch something like that right at this point.
right.
So who would what we really need is
a big mover.
We need a really rich person.
Yeah.
or a person who
like
really
Bill
believe
Gates
who really believe in this concept, who want to leave something behind. They want to do something, for humanity, thinking in bigger terms.
We could have another collapse and have enough people mobilize and say, "Wait a minute, something's wrong with this economic system. We keep having these collapses." And so let's, get together and try out some different theories. I mean, I could see how it could theoretically happen and just be organized by lawmakers to say we're going to put this one here and this one there. But you're right; it would be so much faster if a big, mover that, one of these billionaires said, "Look, let's put it to a test." You're right. I agree.
Yeah, I think so. But again, the challenge there is, unfortunately, today there are so many what I term hoggists. That's what capitalism is to me. It's hoggism. It's just a system of perpetual concentrated ownership. The same few wealthy ownership class getting richer and richer and richer through concentrating the ownership of capital assets that are formed.
Right.
And that can be Jeff Bezos, any of these guys. It's just amazing. Bill Gates, all these guys,
Yep.
Warren Buffett. I mean, all these guys know what ownership is. I mean, God, that's why they're wealthy. I mean, they cannot help understand how they are wealthy. They should be saying to our so-called political representatives that, look, let's start focusing on creating capital owners rather than focusing on creating jobs, which are in the path of destruction anyway from tectonic shifts in the means of production, which means we're going more and more and more and more and more and more rapidly than ever before to the non-human means of production. If we focus on ownership creation, capital ownership creation, as a byproduct of unleashing the productive power of our economy and of our people, jobs will follow. Meaningful jobs will follow to the point that we actually build a future economy that can support general affluence for every child, woman, and man.
Right.
That's where we should be headed. And during the building of that future economy, it will take, maybe it's going to take a generation. We will, our people will have built up substantial portfolios of capital assets that will produce an income for them.
Right.
And they will also have that may be looked at as in terms of their second income, with their other income being a job, or vice versa. It's their primary income, and a job is their second income, or a job's not even needed at all, and they're out going and doing what they love to do. And it's all about financing. The whole key is to financing, and like I said, the whole logic of corporate finance is that any investment made is expected to pay for itself within a reasonable point of time. But for a bank loan and or a commercial bank loan, some form of collateral is necessary, and that's where the past savings come in, or the capital asset portfolio you already have come in, that you can pledge against any potential failure that the new project may not generate the earnings you thought it would generate. So how do we cover that collateral? Because the vast majority of Americans, they don't have any past savings. There's no potential for them to even be able to save. And if they do save, it's really not that substantial at all. It's so meaningful. Yeah, we have millions of stockholders in the stock market, but only a few really own it all. The rest of those stockholders may own 100 shares, may own 10 shares, may own 1,000 shares or whatever. It's insignificant. So anyway, the substitute for collateral is capital, credit, insurance, and reinsurance. And what I do is I always equate that with the Federal Housing Administration, FHA, insured mortgages. You know, we're able to build homes for millions and millions of Americans using FHA loans, insured loans. And basically what that means is that in addition to the principal of the mortgage paid every month and the interest, there was basically roughly a 2% insurance premium built into that mortgage, okay? And that with millions of people paying 2% of their mortgage, we had millions and millions and millions, or billions and billions and billions, or maybe even trillion of insurance reserve monies in the event that Joe failed or Dave failed or Gary failed on his mortgage, right?
Right.
The bank would be whole. They wouldn't lose anything.
Right.
All right, now think about a home. A home is not a capital asset in terms of productive. It's a consumption item. You consume a home. It only becomes an asset to you once you sell it. But then you don't have a home anymore.
True.
You don't have a roof over your head when you sell it. So it's a consumption item. It doesn't generate its own income. You have to have a separate source of income to pay that mortgage. So a home is a consumption item. You require a separate source of income. But a capital asset generates its own income. Right. No outside income is required. So it pays for itself. So it's inherently financeable and inherently insurable. If you can insure a home that doesn't produce an income, you sure as heck should be able to insure a capital asset that produces an income.
Absolutely. Yep.
It's that simple. That's what the Capital Homestead Act is all about, is being able to empower every child, woman, and man to acquire ownership participation in the major corporations that are growing the economy and new viable projects and new viable businesses using pure interest-free capital credit, repayable solely out of the earnings generated by the investments, without the requirement of any past savings or any pledge whatsoever or any loss of income from a job or anything else, period. There's no risk involved. The risk would be covered by these insurance premiums, by capital credit insurance and reinsurance, like a similar agency like the Federal Housing Administration. We could create a capital diffusion corporation or whatever,
Right. Yep.
And you grow the economy, and what's most important is we start now because it's about the children. It's about your kids, it's about my grandkids, it's about their kids, and I got 5 great-grandkids, and all this stuff. It's about them. And if we start now, by the time they're 60, they're going to retire in luxury.
And if we don't, they're going to be upside down in debt, and there's going to be a collapse.
Totally. Exactly. And they're going to be subject to the welfare state with elite oligarchs controlling their lives.
Yep. It's
They'll be
sad.
enslaved. They're already enslaved now, but they'll be really enslaved.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
we were talking about how these principles could be displayed on a small scale if they're not passed. For example, if we don't get the Capital Homestead Act passed right away, but maybe there's a law that is put into effect to help set up one particular test area. I was thinking about the proposal that you might have heard of. You might have been involved in it, the one like the Old Man River City, and I'm, encourage people to look that up. And because one of your many degrees is in urban planning and design, I was
Right.
thinking that, you know, that would be a great example of just third way ownership and funding mechanisms. And another popular subject that I wanted to ask you about, I've learned on that kind of thing about from another binary economist, Wendy Wiesner, is called co-housing. And I've been thinking about that. It's pretty neat. Do you support that kind of co-housing where you combine families from diverse economic categories in one community?
I really haven't. I really haven't read about that much. So I really not that familiar with that concept.
Okay.
But
I just thought I would mention it because it seems to
right.
me that where we have areas with failing schools and crime and hopelessness, there's naturally going to, breed more of those problems. And you got successful people trying to live away from that, but eventually no one
Yeah.
can feel safe anywhere, if it's going on like somewhere, it's going to get to you, So instead of paying more,
We're drifting toward a third world country structure.
yes.
That's our drift right now, and we gotta switch course. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, my architectural stuff. I've also published for 10 years Ultimate Home Design magazine, and I built one of the greenest homes, designed and built one of the greenest homes in America.
Wow.
On the coast of the Pacific Coast, 100 miles north of San Francisco at the Sea Ranch.
Okay,
So
now I knew you had a website.
I've been really into green building technology. So that's what that's all about. So that's what that magazine's all about.
That's great. I knew you had a website that you referred to about that, but I didn't know that one had actually been built.
Oh yeah, I designed that, and it's an incredible home. It's just unbelievable. Yeah, so it's about the kids to me. I mean, we got to change this around, but we're not teaching any of this, which is the other problem. And you got people like Robert Reich, or Reich, or whatever how you pronounce it. At the University of California, and he doesn't talk anything about ownership, about expanding ownership. Right. It's just unbelievable. They're so into the social, collective type of looking at everything rather than strengthening the individual in that. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say is that for a long time I've been a proponent of imposing tariffs because there's so much outsourcing going on. It's unbelievable, and I see it every day. Because of widescreen review, I am well connected with all of the electronics companies in America and in the world, right? And I see this going on. Little American manufacturers can't compete, so they have to go to China to have their cabinets made or whatever. They have to go to Asia or somewhere, or India now or whatever. And it's just like if one goes, then all the others have to go because they have to be competitive. Right. And the outsourcing movement is just gaining strength. It's not lessening; it's getting worse.
Yes.
And all these American corporations, the management of these corporations are investing their retained earnings in these foreign countries.
Right.
And building partnerships with foreign companies, such in China, where state control for many companies is they want to have 51% control if they don't have 100% control as a state-owned industry. They do have entrepreneurial industries as well, which is gaining more strength, but still they have a thumb on everything. So we're losing our manufacturing capability to manufacture goods and products and to deliver services. We're losing that.
And I think also that is a symptom of the flawed money system too, because the American dollar has jockeyed to become, the controlling currency. And so all these other countries, they can't create the dollar, but we can. So we're taking advantage of them. It's almost like the dollar is exploiting the rest of the world.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's another factor. But how do we bring these industries back? That's the problem. I don't know. But you cannot continue unfair trade practices. I mean, you just can't do it. We'll never bring our industries back if they're able to go abroad, build factories, invest in those people, and then build the products, put Frigidaire name on the refrigerators or whatever, and then bring them back into the U.S. at a lower price and not be penalized for it.
Right. But in the long-term picture, I think, tariffs can help for the short term, but in the long term, if globally money was created only for productive purposes, then things would become in balance locally in so many areas that, the standard of living would come up as that happened, so that, these countries weren't constantly trying to cut each other's throats, so to speak.
Right, exactly, yeah. Yeah, I mean, in the short run, people, we're going to get hurt in terms of consumers. Put on your consumer hat now, because the prices will go up.
Right.
But long term, we build up our own manufacturing capabilities, and we become stronger economically and more independent. And I think that's the better way to go.
Yes, it is. And I've heard some arguments about, defense and security, that, if we don't have any manufacturing, if something bad did happen where one of these crazy dictators started, forming a big army and invading, and so we wouldn't even have the ability to make the armaments and things and tanks and, that we need to. So that is.
No, exactly. Yeah. No, we always were self-dependent, we were always independent as a growing nation. And, but these managers of these major corporations are making really bad decisions. And, again, it's this hoggish attitude.
Yes.
It's just unbelievable. And we should be building all this here and simultaneously creating basically universal ownership among all children, women, and men.
Yep.
As individuals, not collectively.
Right.
That's what we should be doing.
Not through the government.
Right.
Well, I agree with your angles. I wanted to give you an opportunity to, let's see, so tell us, we've got the foreconomicjustice.org that people can go to, and then Facebook.com, you can search for Gary Reber or Editor Gary, and then tell me the website for the high-tech home, its efficiencies.
Oh, Ultimate Home Design. It's ultimatehomedesign.com.
Okay. Are there any other websites or social media pages that you said the Huffington Post, they can look at your work there?
Yeah, I think when anyone goes to foreconomicjustice.org, one of the articles you might start with is you search for economic democracy and binary economics.
Okay.
That's the title of it.
Yeah, I think I remember reading
and that's a good overview article that gets in some good depth, but it's a good overview.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. I tell you, time flies on these podcasts. Mike had told me that they ideally shouldn't go over 30 minutes, but I don't think I could ever do that.
I don't think so. I know ideally people aren't going to listen, but, that's what it is, Oh, that's the other problem we're facing. Time span.
Yeah, exactly.
People today do not want to read.
They don't read.
I mean, when I was going through school, I was reading like crazy, all kinds of stuff.
Yep.
And in college and university, and I mean, I was soaking it up, and I was reading, counter views and this view and this. I was trying to learn both sides of the argument.
Right. Absolutely.
That's how you develop your thinking skills. But today, they just want to read a couple sentences, or the Twitter mentality.
Yeah, and they want to watch a YouTube video.
Right. You can't comprehend this kind of stuff.
No, you've got to be able to read at some point, I would think. Hopefully more people will soon, but we do need to make more videos also and reach these young people.
We need to make CESJ needs to make a really, powerful, comprehensive video.
Yeah. Well, we're working on it.
Good.
Definitely need to get it done as quickly as possible. Well, I really enjoyed talking to you today, Gary. It was really, really a good experience, and I hope that that everyone takes an opportunity to read some of your work and get in touch with you too.
Yeah, and support the Center for Social and Economic Justice as well. They do a lot of great work, and that website's got so much material on it. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it goes back
decades. There's a whole doctorate degree just involved in understanding all of that.
Absolutely, and the way Norm has formed so many coalitions and people in the social justice with the economic justice. The only real difference between you and him, y'all both have a lot of qualifications, but somehow or another he was able to do that stuff full time for all those years.
I know.
Really, yeah, he's formed a lot. But man, I tell you, you guys both, I mean, just your education and the political contacts and the corporate contacts, it's really neat to be able to talk to you guys and call you friends, to be my friends. I've just really
absolutely, Dave. Yeah,
absolutely. Own or be owned.
Yeah, exactly. I always say own the future or be owned.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I like that. Focus on the future. We gotta make sure our future, we're owning it. Yeah.
I agree. Well, thanks.
All right.
You have a good afternoon.
You too. All right. Thank you.
Right.
Bye.
Thank you, buddy. We'll see you.